everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 8 of Vinland Saga. Does the rule of 8 apply to a 25 episode series? I don't know. Usually on my channel, if a series is like 11 to 13 episodes, the 8th episode is usually a really good episode and is like the turning point into the third act of a series. But I don't know if that really applies to a series like this. It's kind of only like a third of the way through. So I'm still hoping that the 8th episode this week will be really good because 8's my lucky number. So I'm hoping it's a good episode. But we've got some comments to go through before we start. And I'm really excited because I've loved where Vinland Saga is. Our dear Thorfinn. We've been talking about this on the Discord and in the comments, but Thorfinn in season 1 was kind of like, he was just one note and stagnant. And the whole time in season 1, I'm like, I want to see Thorfinn be able to reflect and to grow, to make a friend. And then he's finally getting the opportunity to do it in this season. He's found a friend in Einar. He's been able to reflect, and he's now starting to grow as a person. And this overgrown baby is starting to become a man. And I'm like, I'm here for it. So I know that eventually there's going to be battles and action and death and destruction. But I'm like, Vinland Saga, if you want to give me a good old farmhand arc to go through, I'm here for it. This farm girl can take it, right? But speaking of which, we do have some comments to talk about before we start this episode. Alan Acavado, however you say your last name, talked about on Patreon that Thorfinn doesn't understand love. That could be one of the reasons he doesn't really react to ANGST is because he's pretty indifferent. He doesn't understand love. But honestly, I think Thorfinn's just like, Thorfinn's having trouble loving himself, much less in the words of RuPaul, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? That's kind of Thorfinn's dilemma, right? So he's kind of dealing with that right now. But I also like Alan's comment about Kettle. Kettle pretending to have this history he pretends to have this history with nonviolence in his past in battle, but he hates it. I love that dynamic that the last episode with Kettle has really expanded his character in lots of ways and made it very tragic for Einar, who I'm like, he just wants to be with ANGST, and Kettle is not letting that happen, and it's so frustrating, right? But I like that we have that dynamic with Kettle, but then we have Sverkel, who understands his heritage, but also seems perfectly content to settle down and be content with the kind of cultivation he's brought himself, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Alan, I like that you brought that up. So kind of expanding upon that is this comment by Little Dude was so good. They were like, the idea that Thorfinn has been so used to destruction in his life, and this is the first time he's actually had the idea of creation and the wonders of creation put before them. I mean, he doesn't need kids to prove that. It's kind of interesting. It's like the idea of creation. Again, if you're going with your Thorfinn as asexual canon, then Thorfinn doesn't need kids to prove the value of creation. He sees it through cultivation and farming. That's how he sees it. He sees something through growing plants and crops. He sees the value of creation and what it can do. Thor's had that same revelation. It was just the creation of an actual baby in Ylva. So yeah, I really like that, Little Dude. So I'm glad you pointed that out. And then Alexander Q talked about how, in their opinion, Kettle is like a dark mirror of Thor's. And Sverkel is more like Thor's ideally, which I thought was rather interesting. I like the idea of Kettle being this dark mirror of Thor's. He's not entirely like him, but he's kind of like a twisted or warped version of those ideals that Thor's was kind of presenting at the start of season 1. So I like that. I like that kind of observation about him a lot. And then finally, Alex Johnson, we talked about everybody being a slave to something in season 1, and that was Askeladd's whole MO, but it's the idea that Kettle's never truly been free. He can't be free to be himself and fully portray his ideals because he's either afraid of his son, he's afraid of his father, he's afraid of the society that he lives in, he's afraid of the King of Denmark. He's not allowed to truly be free because he has to put on an act. And I thought that was really interesting. So I liked those comments. I'm glad y'all made them. I really appreciated it. Honestly, I did. So thank you guys so much. And before we start, A special thank you to our philanthropy tier on Patreon. Over on Patreon, we have $1 to join the Discord and vote in the polls to replace series, like we will eventually do with Vinland Saga. And then for $5, you get to see next week's episode before everybody else on YouTube. And then those in the philanthropy tier, they're super kind and help support me with a $10 donation. So I want to give a special shout out to Larry Manning, Tyrone, Kenny, Dana, Edgar, Anime Annie, and Truck. Thank you guys so much. Y'all help me do what I do and help me to enjoy talking about these series with you all because I really love it. So all of my love. Thank you guys so much. Cheers. And here's to a great 8th episode of Vinland Saga. Hard to believe we've been watching for 2 months, right? Isn't that crazy? But I'm excited, y'all. I can't wait to see what's in store for our boy Thorfinn. I mean, the last couple episodes have had a little bit of foreshadowing in it, and I'm like, Snake, Sverkel, please don't do that. But surely it won't be bad. So surely it won't be bad, right? Right. But we're going to find out here with episode 8, and we're going to start that in 3, 2, 1, and I will see y'all on the other side. Shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be surprised. We've gone 7 episodes without a really big shocking cliffhanger, and this is the first one where the show's like, we're veering into the second act. I guess we can have a cliffhanger now. Oh my gosh. You know what? Haters gonna hate, but I love Vinland Saga this season. This season has been so good. I love this season just as much as season 1. I still think that there needs to be some epicness to elevate it up to season 1. And I feel like we're going to get there. I really do. I feel like we're going to get there. I didn't bring out Whiteboard Coon because the only thing really I would have brought Whiteboard Coon out is to talk about the theorizing of what Thorfinn is forgetting. And we'll talk about that as we go through it in his journey. But I'm loving the journey that Thorfinn is going on. The journey, if I had a big complaint about season 1, it's that our main character, the one who changes in season 1 is Canute. And he changes even more so far in this season. But in season 1, Canute comes out of his shell and realizes that he can be a leader. And then now he's starting to get deeper into the game, deeper into the trenches in this season, kind of behind the scenes. We've only seen really 1 episode talking about it, but it's enough. A lot of exposition was in that 1 episode, right? But with Thorfinn, my biggest complaint in season 1 is that Thorfinn didn't have room to grow. He didn't have soil to plant himself in and grow. It's funny, he didn't have any roots. Thorfinn in season 1 didn't have any roots. He was constantly being uprooted from place to place and moving with Askeladd. And the thing of it is, he was a child. So characters like Askeladd and Bjorn and the other adult Vikings, they'd already grown. They were fully grown and ready to take off and do their own thing, and they did. But Thorfinn was still a little baby sprout. He needed to root himself and grow and then take off and leave. And Thorfinn never had that opportunity. It's kind of, if we're doing the farming symbolism, he kept getting uprooted and taken from place to place, but he never had the chance to grow or blossom. And so he was constantly just in this stagnant state, right? Like the weeds or like the wheat as they're uprooted. So I like the idea that this is Thorfinn's season to kind of plant himself, face his inner demons, figure out what he wants. Because as he says in this episode, he's like, I'm empty. He's like, I spent 11 years of my life living off of hatred. And he's like, I didn't have any, contingency plan for after I killed Askeladd. He's like, I only lived on the fact that I wanted revenge on this man that killed my father. And so I followed him for 11 years to have that opportunity. And the moment it was taken away, he's like, I didn't have anything else to live for. So I'm hollow inside. And all he's left with are the memories of what he's done in the past to try to get to Askeladd. And it's like, what does he do from here? Where does he go to? And so I love the idea that Thorfinn has someone like Einar who's trying to help him. And Einar doesn't know what to do. I do like in this episode that Einar is not his life coach. Einar's not like, well, just buck up, buddy. Einar's really understanding in that he's like, I don't really know what to tell you. But, you can't hate a dead man. Doesn't do any good. He's gone. It's like, you've got to figure out what you want to do. But Einar's like, I don't have the answers, man. I can just be a supportive and kind person, and we go from there. And I love that about Einar. I love that Einar's not trying to, like, give him answers and some, like, BS. He's like, no, I'm just going to be a supportive friend, and we'll farm together and see what happens. I love that, right? So we'll get into this episode because this was really good. But I'm loving this season for taking its time, not rushing, and developing Thorfinn's character so that, because we all know it's coming. It's all going to lead up to battles, and Knut's going to get back involved. Thorkel probably is. At some point, is Thorfinn and Knut going to meet up again? We don't know that. That may have been something like season 3 down the road. But at least we know the action, the battle is coming. It's imminent. And so I'm absolutely on board with this series, taking its time, letting Thorfinn grow as a character, build him up. And what I would love to see is Thorfinn, like, rising up out of the ashes, being reborn. I would love the idea that Thorfinn rises up from the ashes, from the fire and the flames. He rises up and gets reborn as a better character. It would be an amazing dynamic if Thorfinn, like, becomes like a phoenix, rises from the ashes of his demons and becomes a better person. And then Knut drowns in the blood of his enemies and gets sunk deeper. It'd be cool if you had this comparison, because at the end of season 1, you had Knut rising up to kingdom and Thorfinn falling into this pit of despair. And in season 2, it'd be cool if we reversed that and had Thorfinn rising up and Knut falling into this depth. And he's getting too deep into the game, right? Where he can't get out. It'd be a cool reversal, right? That would be really neat if we could do that with those characters. Don't know if we're going to do it or not, but it would be really cool. I'd be all about that, right? So I think that could be really neat. I don't know, but we need to go through this episode. Sverkel is becoming one of my favorites, man. He is a great embodiment of something Thorfinn needs to look at as a role model. And I kind of like that. Alexander Q's comment about him being more like Thor's than Kettle, I feel you now. I get it. Watching this episode. I'm like, no, you are right. You are correct. So, God, this episode was great. The animation, the facial expressions, Einar is so relatable. His frustration, I'm like, those bitches just coming in and trashing that farmland. Like, how dare you? It's like, it's one thing when, like, a natural event occurs that makes it happen. Like if there's a flood or like a storm, or debris from like a tornado or something, or if like it's animal caused, like if a bunch of deer come in and eat your crop or something like that, like that's frustrating, but it's part of nature. So you're like, you know what? As much as this sucks, it's just the way that it is and we can't do anything about it. But this ain't like that. No, these guys came in and did it themselves. They wasted all that time. They made Thorfinn and Einar move those logs for them and do their shitty work while they sat there and drank lemonade. But then they took the time that they could have been doing their own damn jobs to mess up that farmland. Oh, hell no. I'm like, oh, that just like struck a chord. It's like somebody coming in Harvest Moon and wrecking your garden. You're like, I got to get money to get potpourri some flowers. What is this? Oh. If you've never played Harvest Moon, that reference will be lost, but there'll be like the one person in the comments, I got it. It's like, ugh. So man, the dream though. So Thorfinn's thing is that he can't remember his dreams. He can't remember his dreams, but he keeps on having the same one. What's interesting is that Einar says father and Asklad in his dreams, which is a two-way street, right? On the one hand, he's thinking of both his father Thor's and Asklad, but we've seen neither of them in the dream. So we're just seeing like the moment right before he wakes up. And then the other thing is that kind of connotation of viewing it. It's like a play on words where it's not only his father and Asklad, but it's referring to like Father Asklad. Because yeah, that was the big debate in season 1 is Asklad like a father figure to Thorfinn? I would argue yes. Is he a good father figure? No. But I do believe he is. I do believe whether Asklad and Thorfinn wanted to accept it or not, he is a father figure to Thorfinn. He is. Not a good one. A strong and cruel man. But he was over Thorfinn's shoulders for 11 years. There's a bond there. It's not maybe a good bond to have, but it is a bond. And it is, I feel like both Thor's and Askeladd are these two sides of a coin of what Thorfinn needs to remember, right? Thorfinn keeps saying, he's like, I know I'm supposed to remember something, but I can't remember what it is. And I feel like there's two sides of the coin of what he needs to remember. On the one hand, there is Askeladd on one side of the coin, reminding him about the cruel things that he's done and about how delusional and useless chasing something for revenge and hatred truly is. And because Askeladd hated himself. Askeladd did the same thing. He chased revenge after his father. He did the same thing. He lived a life of revenge. And then that it puts a whole new spin on Askeladd's character too, to say like he hated himself and what he became. And he did the whole mercenary thing and going after the treasure. But you know what? He was an empty man too. He was empty just like Thorfinn. Because at the end of the day, like, Askeladd didn't have a family. That kind of gets brought up in this. Now that you think about it, if we're talking about the two sides of the coin, Askeladd didn't have a family. He didn't have a partner. He didn't have like an affinity towards treasure. He collected loot with the guys, but he didn't hoard it away, right? He didn't seem to care about it. He wasn't materialistic. He was just doing it for funsies and for the survival aspect of it. And because it brought all these people together under his wing. But he wasn't into the treasure. He wasn't materialistic about it. He didn't love battle like Thorkel does, right? Thorkel has this like sense of battle in his heart. He didn't have that. He didn't have this religious sense of justice that Canute gained in season 1. Didn't have that. Didn't have a family or spouse. So Askeladd was actually an empty man too. And the only thing that was filling that void was just doing these different jobs and trying these different things, trying to figure out something to give purpose to his life. And I guess the closest thing to that would be Wales. His people, his mother that he lost, and her people were like the closest thing to filling that void for him. So it became something that he fought for. It's what he killed Sven for, right? It's why he wanted Canute to take the throne for, because it was protecting the only thing he really cared about. And so I feel like for Thorfinn, Askeladd represents that part of the coin he doesn't need to forget, in terms of he doesn't need to forget how hollow and empty one becomes just pursuing battle, revenge, and bloodlust with no purpose in mind. Like it's a fleeting goal. There's no point to it. But then on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, there's Thor's. And Thor's whole deal was, if you find something or someone you love and you pursue it and you want to maintain that, that will give you purpose in your life. You don't need the bloodshed. You don't need the battle or revenge or whatever. Thor's is like, I was an empty man too until I found something to give me purpose. And that thing that gave me purpose, my family, kept me going, and it gave my life meaning, and it kept me from being an empty man myself. So I feel like the lessons he was trying to teach Thor's back when he was a child in season 1, Thorfinn has forgotten, and he feels like he needs to remember it, but he can't think of what it is. And so part of him is like, well, maybe I just need to forget. But it's like, no, you don't need to. You need to remember what that is. And maybe part of it for Thorfinn is just pursuing that knowledge, just keeping it going, keep trying to remember. If he keeps trying to remember, that means there's something to remember. There's something important he needs to know. And so he has to keep alive to figure it out, right? But God, I love that. I love it so much. But yeah, so the dream that he has, the very first dream, is he sees Einar as a kid. And I like that it's in the darkness, so he can't really see the mom and the sister, because Thorfinn doesn't know what they look like. It's kind of like, I have very vivid dreams, and I remember my dreams a lot. I remember them often. And I've had dreams where there's just like people in there that I don't know, but in my head, my mind's like, yes, you know this person, but you don't really know what they look like, so they're kind of blurry or in the shadows. Like Thorfinn's dream. He doesn't know what Einar's parents, his mom or his sister, look like, so he just kind of has, the only one that looks up at him and shows him his face is baby Einar, what he believes is him, right? I love the red framing Thorfinn too, like the red fire and blood and destruction, everything. But he's so soft. He's like, Einar. And then that's when he falls. He sees the younger version of himself, right? I like that they show that Thorfinn has not got much taller. He's about the same height. He's just younger. And he goes to grab himself to stop him from killing Einar. And that's when he falls into the chasm, right? He falls into that pit. And I like that it's the hands grabbing him like the OP. It's this pit of despair that he can't climb. I feel at some point he falls down this pit at the end of this episode. I feel like there's going to be a literal symbolic him climbing out. He climbs out of the pit to get out and get his freedom. Like, or maybe not, one thing I do like about this episode is that at no point do they establish that, oh, Thorfinn just got over things. That was something we actually talked about in the Discord a few weeks back around the time of episode 6, was it got brought up. I think Edgar brought it up. The idea of like, Edgar, we were talking about episode 6 and how like, it just seems like, oh, Thorfinn and Einar are friends now. Like he's over it. It's like he moved on. It's like, that seemed rather sudden. And we were talking about how, well, we show a passage of time and Thorfinn becomes better friends with Einar, and they kind of realize their situation of, well, we can't be at each other's throat forever. Nothing's going to get accomplished. So we have to work together, and that forms that camaraderie, it forms that friendship. But I feel like with Thorfinn, even back in episode 6, it was not going to be something that was just solved overnight. Thorfinn has carried these demons for over a decade. And they've plagued him every night. I mean, at this point, Einar's just getting up early because he knows Thorfinn's going to have a panic attack and night terrors. But I like that this show recognizes that just because he's become friends with Einar, just because he's slowly learning things, this overgrown baby is not something that's cured instantly, right? It's not cured instantly. It's something that he is going to have to work on and deal with maybe for the rest of his life. And that's fine if Thorfinn can deal with it and learn from it, but it's not going to be something that goes away. And I think that's a very beautiful and heartbreaking portrayal of trauma like this. As somebody, whether they're a veteran or somebody that's been in war, just because you get out of that environment, even years later, it doesn't mean that imagery and that those memories go away or that you just get over it. That doesn't happen, right? So I do appreciate the realism of that Thorfinn's still struggling with this. He's found some inner peace. He's getting better, but it's going to be a long, long road. But I like that they're taking their time with this season to set that up, to let his character grow. Because I feel like that the series is setting up Canute to fall further and further into the darkness, and Thorfinn's getting more and more towards the light. And that light is kind of, I think, what his father wants him to figure out, right? But we're not there yet. But man, there's so many animation details that Mappa does well in this episode that I was really, really happy about. The nails missing on his fingers, the veins in his hands, the scrapes and cuts and bruises, that all feels real. It feels like it's from the manga. It feels just authentic. It's so gritty. I love it. And then the moment he wakes up, like there's so many beautiful shots. Like I was sitting there thinking in this episode going, I have so many screenshots that I want to take because Thorfinn looks gorgeous throughout all of this. I'm sitting here going, am I crushing on Thorfinn? I was like, Am I simping for Thorfinn? I never thought I would get to this point. I was like, when did this happen? All of season 1, I was like, who would simp for Thorfinn? And everybody in the Discord was like, spoiler box. We can't talk about it. But now I'm like, oh god. I feel like Squidward in that SpongeBob episode where I'm like, oh no, he's hot. It's like, that's where I'm at. I'm like, oh god, no, Thorfinn's hot. And he's of age, so it's technically okay, but I feel like that aunt who's watched, I feel like that teacher who's watched their student grow up, and you're just like, no, you can't think these things. Oh god, no. But it's true, he looks so good in this episode. And Thorfinn says, he's like, if I fall down there, I can't get back out. It's like, and the corpses dragging him back, like the demons of his past trying to drag him back down. It's just, God, it's the symbolism of that moment. And he doesn't want to fall down that chasm, and that's when he wakes up, right? Einar's managed to keep himself, they both grown out the goatees, but Einar's managed to keep his hair relatively short. It's like kind of my length, right? But Thorfinn's been growing his hair out, right? I want it to get as long as Thor's. That's what I want, right? I want it to get long and luxurious and be like Thor's. When he puts it back in that ponytail, it just flows, right? He won't ever have the Chris from Ace of the Diamond swirls, right? He can't have every time I see Thor's with those little curls, I think of Chris Senpai from Ace of the Diamond. He has like little tendrils. He's not got the curly hair to do that. He's got his mother's hair, but I want it to be long and luscious, right? If Canute has short hair, I want him, but Canute's hair grows back. But I want Thorfinn to have some long and luxurious locks. He deserves it. But his hair growing longer, you do see that passage of time, right? And then Einar being like, hey, are you okay, oh buddy, oh pal? He's like, I dreamed about falling down a cliff. And Einar's like, oh, so you can remember it this morning. He's like, you do? And he's like, a little bit. He's like, you were saying all kinds of things in your sleep, like father and Asklad. And him like, is Asklad someone's name? And that shot, I want to get a picture of Thorfinn's face. Thorfinn, I cannot tell you all how in words explain how beautiful his character looks and the range of emotions. We're so used in season 1 to seeing either disgruntled, feral, angry, betrayed, angsty Thorfinn. Like it was all variations of the same emotion on Thorfinn's face the entire season. And so seeing him go through, like, we see a little bit of anger sprout up in this episode and it looks good on him, but I love, like, we see like the soft look and like sincere look, like his eyes being huge and having these like big soft expressions, and then seeing him like feel sad and dejected but also like concerned, like just seeing this myriad of emotions that Thorfinn portrays to us. It's beautiful, and I'm like, it makes me want to go get the manga now and read it, right? But I'm gonna wait. But yeah, I love that expression. It's gorgeous. So here's the thing. We go back to Thorfinn trying to realize and think, okay. He's like, what am I forgetting? And we see the wheat growing. They're back at the well. And as he's pulling up water to rinse his face off, he says, no matter what I do, I can't remember my dreams. I can't fully remember them, right? And so Thorfinn's trying to gather water for himself to clean his face and stuff, while Einar is having this conversation with Arnheid, right? And Arnheid and him, he says to her, I followed her wondering what she wanted to show me, and it was a moth this big. He's making like the most innocent of small talks, and she's like, oh, cute. And as Einar's talking about this giant moth that he found, Thorfinn's like, all I know is that my dreams were horrifying. It's not funny, but it kind of is, because Thorfinn's having this like big existential crisis and wondering like what's the source of these night terrors he's having. And Einar is telling the girl he has a crush on about a butterfly. They are living different lives right now. Let's just say that. And then Einar says, I spent half an hour explaining to Lotta that it was a moth, not a butterfly. He's talking about his sister. Lot, not a butterfly. So Einar's reminiscing and talking to her about his family, and Thorfinn's like, I feel like there's something I need to remember. And he says his sister was keen on keeping the butterfly. Like Einar's being so precious, and Arnheid's like, this is great. And meanwhile, Thorfinn's like, there's something I need to remember. He's like, but it scares me. And I wish I could truly forget, but I know I'm not supposed to. And it's like, no, he needs both sides of that coin. The part that's scary is the past that he can't the past is going to follow him no matter what. That's like, it's ingrained into him. So, but he doesn't need to forget it, because there's lessons learned from that past that he doesn't need to let go. So even though it scares him, he can't forget it. But the stuff that he isn't able to remember is the stuff he needs to move forward. So Thorfinn right now has gone from being in this stagnant space in this quicksand where he was going like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back sort of situation, and wasn't making any progress. Now it's like he's gotten out of the quicksand. He still remembers the quicksand, and that's good. But it's like someone's dangling a carrot in front of him of what he needs to do, and he's just not there yet to get it. And I feel like the completion of Thorfinn's rebirth to a new character is going to be figuring out, okay, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What am I doing? Right? I don't think it's going to be a family. I don't think that's going to be it, right? I can't see Thorfinn getting to that point yet. But he's definitely not ready for that type of emotion or that type of commitment and weight. But I do think he's going to figure out a reason why he's alive. Like, there's a purpose. I'm hoping and hopeful that it's not going to be revenge, right? I don't think Thorfinn cares about Canute. I don't think he cares about Thorkel. The only character he really cares about in the past is Askeladd. And he tells Einar, he's like, the problem is I don't hate him. That's the problem. He's like, I realize now, it's like he's forgiven him, right? So we'll talk more about that when we get to that roof scene. But yeah, he says, I wish I could forget, but I know I'm not supposed to. And so then, yeah, we see our two dudes like struggling with the horse, doing the retainer's work. And this one retainer, this blonde guy, he pissed me off so much in this episode because, yeah, they try to make excuses for Einar. And I feel like the other two guys, they're not really on board, but it's like peer pressure. They're also kind of weak-willed, so they go along with whatever this one retainer says. But I'm like, he's just jealous because Einar's a good farmer. That's all it is. He's just jealous. And he says, well, it's not fair. Like, the slaves shouldn't get to farm. That's such an interesting take on that, because if you look at all the slave narratives that you see here in the U.S., a lot of them, there's not it's the idea that slaves were used to help the white Southern farmers to grow their crop. But what's interesting is the retainers, there's this notion that farming is even too good for these guys. It's too good. Even though they're doing it for Kettle, right? It's too good for them. So that's such an interesting dynamic. But then again, Kettle's made a deal with them that they're farming to earn their freedom. You know, in U.S. slave narratives, that was never on the table. So that part's interesting. And the one guy, I feel like they know Pater. So they know Pater's situation where Pater was bullied, and as we come to find out in this episode, was bullied and pushed to the brink, but he kept on being persistent and made it through. Right? Now, how he did, I wish he would tell them how, because they really need to know. But I feel like Pater's like, well, it's one of those things where you're going to have to figure it out yourself. You know, I can't give you all the answers. And it's like, sure you can, Pater. Sure, why not? Why can't you give us all the answers? But this one guy just pisses me off, where he says farm work is for free men, and he's allowing slaves to do it. It's like, it's one of those, I guess the best analogy for it, this is the best analogy for it, and it's not relating to like U.S. slavery in the 1800s or before. I guess the biggest thing I can relate it to is there are a lot of views I hear about like immigrants that come to the U.S. and work. I taught at a school once that we had a debate going on, and there was a family of students, and they were probably like 16 to 18 year olds whose family came to America and were working on this peach farm, and that was their job. And there was a girl in the class whose family owned the peach farm. And I remember we had a debate, and there was a kid in the class that we were talking about immigration, and the topic got brought up. And it's pretty sensitive because these kids, they were born here in the country, but their parents came here to work. And we got talking about the topic, and it came up where the girl whose grandpa owns the farm, she was like, I don't want to work here. I don't want to do it. So she's like, I don't care who does it. She's like, I'm not taking over the farm, so whatever. And so there's this idea here. I guess you can make the analogy of like when people get mad about, you know, there's been so many South Park and other shows been like, they took our jobs and like all this, and like people getting mad because an immigrant family will come in and take a job, and they're like, well, they took our jobs from us. And I'm like, but you didn't want to do the job, and they do it well. So what you bitching about? You know, it's that's the better analogy here, is that these retainers, they don't want to do the job themselves. And so Einar, who loves farming, has a passion for it, and is thus good at it. He's doing something he loves, and it just happens to be something that's benefiting Kettle. This guy can't stand it because he's jealous that he doesn't have that too. And it's like, but you don't want to do the work that's in front of you. You're making them do it for you. So it is so frustrating to watch. I'm like, no. I'm like, get out of here. And then for him to be the leader of that charge against destroying their crop, I hate it. So I will say this for Thorfinn. Thorfinn has grown so much. In this one episode alone, Thorfinn not only is the one to try to calm Einar down. The day has come, y'all, when Thorfinn has been a calming presence. What? I was like, I never thought I would see the day where Thorfinn would be the one to be like, hey, calm down, man. Like, can you imagine? I think maybe I even said that back in season 1. Maybe I was like, Thorfinn's never going to get to that point. And it's like, what a world-changing season, right? Not only is Thorfinn like a calming presence, but he also is opening up and talking about things in his past that I feel in season 1 Thorfinn would never do. Like, Thorfinn in season 1 was all tsundere and like, I don't want to talk about myself and I don't want to talk about things and like a cat, right? And we were talking in the Discord, there's like a little comic strip that is based off of the series that the animators do, and in it Thorfinn is a little cat. Einar's a donkey, which is hilarious to me, but Thorfinn's a cat in that little comic strip. But yeah, the idea that Thorfinn opens up and talks to Einar speaks volumes to his growth in this scene alone, where he's like, Askeladd is the man who killed my father. And it's so frustrating to hear that, because all of us in the audience are like, but it wasn't his, but he was just doing what Floki told him to do, damn it. So I wonder if them mentioning that at this point in the season, if him mentioning that Askeladd's the one that killed his father, I do wonder if it's going to get brought up that Floki killed him. I wonder if that's going to get brought up. We talked a few episodes ago about what would Thorfinn do if he found that out, that Floki was actually the one that ordered his father to be killed. Because Floki's still around, so what can we do? I feel like I'm in the camp now that by the time Thorfinn gets out of this, by the time he's reborn and goes through this transformation, I feel like the icing on the cake, the cherry on top, is going to be if he finds out Floki killed his father and he goes, oh, well. I'm waiting for that. Like, if Thorfinn goes, if he's not affected by it. Because he's getting to that point with Askeladd, right? He's getting to that point here. We definitely need to talk about it. But, and Einar's like, okay. And he says he was a Danish, I like he calls him a Danish warmonger, which he was. He was. It's just funny to hear him talk about him like that as they're thatching this roof, right? And so he talks about how he hated him. He's like, he was a strong and cruel man. Like, he recognized his strength, but says, I only followed him onto the battlefield to avenge my father. And I followed him for 11 years. And Einar's like, did you get your revenge? He said, no, he was killed by another man right before my eyes. And the crazy thing about it is that Thorfinn doesn't say it's Canute. That's the crazy thing. Thorfinn throughout this entire series has never been one to name drop. He doesn't care who people are. It's never been something he's had any fascination or concern about. He's not been somebody that cares about people's names unless it's Askeladd or his dad, right? And that was just funny because I feel like the moment he brings up it was Canute, that would just set the whole village on fire. Like, Omar would be like, what? You know Canute? What? And Snake would be like, of course you know Canute. Like, I could just picture it, right? So that may be something that actually comes up later if he does tell Einar, if Einar's like, well, who's the guy? Do you even know the guy that killed him? But I don't think he's going to bring it up because all he says is Askeladd was killed by another man before my eyes. Why would Einar care who it is? If Thorfinn doesn't mention it, who knows? But I'm wondering if we're ever going to have that topic brought up. That would be interesting to see if that ends up happening, because Omar would be like, you know Canute? And then it would be like a big thing. And so as Einar is patching up the roof, I like Einar says, I don't know the details, but if you're dreaming about Askeladd, you're not over it. And it's like, yeah, no. Einar is like got his notebook out and is taking therapy notes, right? He's like, if you're still dreaming about him, it means he's still important to you. And you're still thinking about him. You're not fully over it. And Thorfinn's like, yeah, that's the problem. Because he's like, there's something else. Something is not being revealed to me. He's like, I've forgotten something more important. And God, he looks so good there. I can't get over it, y'all. I can't get over how good Thorfinn looks. It's just, I'm going to need to stop pausing on it. I'm going to take one more screenshot before moving on. But the thing that gets me is he acknowledges He says, my thing is that I just had hate in my mind, hate in my heart. And Einar says, well, it's not the kind of thing that you get over just because someone tells you to. And that's kind of the big thing, is that I feel like in a lot of shows, the main character has this big traumatic moment, and then suddenly they're like, well, I've had an internal monologue with myself. I'm over that crisis. We'll never speak of it again. I've solved the trauma. I've cured myself. And what I like about Vinland Saga is it's like, no, that doesn't go away. It sticks with you. And it's not something somebody can... It's like grief. Someone can not say... Like, if you're grieving over the death of someone and you grieve for a decade, someone may say, oh, we'll just get over it. And it's like, that's not how grief works. It's something you may carry with you the rest of your life. And that's just something you have to find a way to live with, right? So Einar's just like, well, I can't tell him to get over it. That's not going to work. But he does say, your quest for revenge is over now, though. Like, what are you going to do? And he's like, but the thing of it is that when he says that, he's like, you've got your revenge, technically. You can't seek it anymore. He's dead now. That part of your journey's over. And then Thorfinn remembers Askeladd talking to him about keeping on living and becoming a true warrior, son of Thor's. And I think the one thing that's bothering Thorfinn is the fact that he's not put together that Askeladd and Thor's are two sides of the same coin. He's not put that together yet. And he's not realized that because he's forgot a lot about what his father said. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, Askeladd's like, I think Askeladd realized what Thor's ideology was, and he was like, yes, you could lead us, you could change things, and it just didn't work out for him. He had to kill him in the end because he wouldn't take over for him. And so I feel like Askeladd telling him to become a true warrior is to kind of do what his father wanted him to do, become a warrior as a man that doesn't need to use a sword. And I feel like that's what's conflicting Thorfinn, is he's realizing that Askeladd is not too unlike his father. And he doesn't totally hate him. He might even have forgiven him for everything. And that part is disturbing to Thorfinn, because he's like, why would I forgive this man? Why would I do that? Why am I not still mad at him? He's like, that's the unsettling thing, is he's like, I don't hate him anymore. And that's my problem. I don't hate him. There's not hate in my heart for him. So what do I do? I've made peace with him dying, and I've made peace with the fact that I can't get revenge. So what the hell am I supposed to do next? What do I live for if the thing I've been living the last 11 years is gone? And that's when Sverkel comes in. And I freaking love Sverkel. I love that little shot of Thorfinn by himself with the thatched roof. He's like, everything's empty now. And Einar's like, I don't know what to tell him, because Einar's like, I don't know what he's gone through. He's like, I don't really have the experience to give him good advice. And then Sverkel's like, then work. Work it. Do it. If you still have hands and you can still do something, then be constructive. Be somebody that makes progress. Go. Learn something new. Sverkel, I feel like, he keeps mentioning that to Kettle, the warrior way. And he talks about Snake with that too. And I feel like Sverkel was maybe in the same position as Thorfinn. And maybe that's why he took Thorfinn and Einar on. Not because of Einar and Einar's passion like we thought, but because Sverkel sees himself in Thorfinn. He's like, he probably is telling Thorfinn, look, I was just like you. I didn't think that I could escape the hell that I was involved with being a warrior. But I found this land, I made this farm, I made it my own, and this became my passion. I learned to do things. I built houses. I farmed the land. I tended the soil myself. I did all this hard work by my own bare hands, and it became a purpose that I could be proud of, and it allowed me to leave that warrior life behind and get settled into something new. And I feel like that's why he's mad at Kettle, because Kettle's kind of lost that sacred respect and appreciation for it. Kettle's having other people do the work for him. And Sverkel's like, no, the pride is doing it yourself. and being a self-made man and doing it and being passionate about it. And for Kettle, that's not really his deal. He's like, he wants to be just more efficient, and Sverkel takes pride in it, right? So I feel like Sverkel sees Thorfinn and sees a bit of himself in him and wants to help Thorfinn, kind of like he probably wanted that help for himself. And I was like, yes, do it. Do all the things, right? And I was like, do you eavesdrop, old man? He's like, shut up and help me fish. So they mentioned Lent. They mentioned Lent, which Lent is Catholic. But again, we're talking like the tens, the aughts, the thousands, the early thousands. So usually Lent is associated with Catholicism, but I'm not sure exactly the religious basis we're connecting with here, but the idea is that you don't eat meat during Lent until Easter. So that's setting up a time frame that it's at least between February and March, right? I'm going to assume it's around February. And he takes them out to the sea to gather the fish up. And he shows them how to do it. And of course, they're not great at first, but he's like, you'll get better. It just takes time. You just learn things one at a time, build up your knowledge. And he's like, if you start learning things one at a time, you will eventually find something you are passionate about and that will give you purpose. Right? And I love that. I love the idea that this old man is teaching Thorfinn. He's teaching these things. And Thorfinn, when he looks back at him, he's like, you can start learning things one at a time. And Thorfinn, I love that he looks back in the sunset at Sverkel, and he looks so good. Like, oh my gosh, when he has that soft look on his face, I'm like, oh my God. He's like, if you're empty, this line here, if you are empty, you can fit anything inside of you. That is like so inspiring, because it's like, if you think you've hit rock bottom and you have nowhere if you've hit rock bottom, the only way to go is up. There's no way else to go. He's like, if you're empty, that means you can fit yourself with anything. Anything can take up your heart and make you feel better. You just need to learn as much as you can to figure out what that's going to be. That's the trick, right? It's better to be empty if you want to be reborn. So he's like, yeah, you've crashed to the bottom of the pit, and now you're going to claw your way up. It's like Batman in the Dark Knight, like crawling. It's like Batman Begins, where he crawls his way back up out of the pit. Or I guess that's the Dark Knight Rises. I guess if I'm getting my Batman movies right, he's like crawling out of the darkness back into the light, right? That's what it is. He's like, if you're going to be reborn, start empty and start fresh. And Thorfinn, just the concept that someone's telling him he could even be reborn. And I love Einar's like, are you eavesdropping? And Thorfinn's like, can I even change? Is it possible for me to be reborn? Can I? And Sverkel's like, work, your hands aren't moving. Meaning yes. He's like, yes, but I'm not going to tell you that. You got to figure it out for yourself. You won't know until you try. If you just think about it, it's not going to happen. You better work, right? And that really, I love that Thorfinn takes that to heart, because as they're walking back, Einar's like, it's getting cold. Winter is coming. He's like, we only caught a bunch of little fish and 3 clams. And Thorfinn, of course, one thing I love about Einar's friendship is that Thorfinn's like, I wasn't listening. I was kind of aloof. And Einar's like, were you lost in thought again? Like, Einar's not mad that Thorfinn wasn't listening. He's just like, oh, what were you thinking about, oh buddy, old pal? And he's like, what does it take for someone to change? And Einar's like, okay, well, you used to be a warrior, right? He's like, warriors are, and I love his imitation where he's like, blood, war, beer. Like, she makes him sound like the biggest, like, hillbilly bro, right? But he's like, nobody would look at you right now, Thorfinn, and think you're a warrior. Unless you're Snake and Sverkel, who are warriors themselves and could pick it out. But he's like, a lay person would not know you're a warrior. So he's like, you're kind of already changing, whether you realize it or not. He's like, you are already changing. And I love that Thorfinn says, I didn't have an axe, I'm like, you kind of did in one episode, though. I love that Einar gets a little laugh out of that. He's like, looking at you now, I wouldn't think you're a former warrior. He's like, no. He's like, I'm glad I did. I'm glad that Einar did not meet Thorfinn back then. And could you imagine Einar meeting Thorfinn from season 1? Oh, he'd be dead in 2 seconds. Yeah, no. Feral, wild child, kitty cat Thorfinn would have none of it. He's like, the worst case is you may have killed me. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And so Thorfinn, he hears Einar tell him that people can change. You're probably on your way to becoming a better person right now. He's like, you're doing it now. You just don't realize it. It's like you watching someone grow when you're away from them for a while. You don't notice, well, you don't notice it when you see them every day, but then when you're away for a while and you come back, you're like, oh crap, you did change a lot, right? Especially like someone growing up. And Thorfinn, when he looked over, I wanted to see what he was looking at. And I was like, what? It's looking at Asklad. Okay, I thought in the episode, God, when he looked over, I thought it was going to be like one of those retainers were coming to ambush him. That's what I thought it was. And I was like, oh, they're about to get ambushed by the retainers. No, it was Asklad, the image of Asklad in the woods, like with his back to him. Uh-huh. And then Thorfinn's like, you think so? And he says, I do. I love that little smile. God, Mappa, you can keep animating Thorfinn like this all day long. I'm here for it. And he says, thank you. And Mappa loves them a tree shot. They love them a forest. If you've watched Attack on Titan, if you've watched the series, Mappa loves animating them a forest. And if we're going to have our characters in a big existential, metaphorical, soul-seeking session, it's going to be in the middle of the woods. I am all here for it. But damn it, this scene with the wheat. I hate it. I hate it because Einar instantly knows what is wrong. And he knows that this was not a natural disaster. It is something cruel. And when Thorfinn like has that scared look on his face, he's like, why would someone do this? All I can think of is the world is a cruel place. Because people are assholes. That's why. And we can't have nice things. That's why Thorfinn. Like, I just feel like he's so distraught and sad. And Einar is like, wheat is a hardy crop. They knew what they were doing. And him just being so in the shadows and knowing, and the moment he's like, they're the only ones who could have done this. And Thorfinn's like, well, wait a minute. What are you going to do? No. He's like, Einar, no. He's like, we can't do anything. He's like, we don't have proof that they did it. If we question them, they're going to deny it. It's not going to work. And he tells them to stop. We'll talk to Pater first. We'll do that. And Thorfinn, seeing how mad he is, he's like, you're awfully calm, Thorfinn. Don't you understand the situation? They're going to get no money. They've wasted all this time for nothing. We use up the soil's fertility, but we'll have no harvest. We'll have to borrow seeds for the next planting too. We're just getting further and further in debt. But the thing of it is that's not what gets him. It's not the fact that they did that. It's not the fact that he's going to go into more debt. That's not the problem. The problem is farming is sacred to Einar. Growing things is sacred to him. He's like, don't they realize? He's like, they should know the difficulty and joy of growing wheat. It's like, for Einar, this whole cultivation thing, it's a metaphor for that thing in life that you enjoy. Like whether it's having a family, whether it's working a job, whether it's growing a crop, like all of those things involve a great amount of difficulty, but also a great amount of joy. And for Einar, he's like, this is the only thing I had that gave me purpose and meaning, and they took it from me. It's like them slaughtering a family or slaughtering a spouse to him. He's like, it's the same thing. It's not the matter of what it would take to get it back. It's the fact that it's lost. And they did it without respecting the difficulty and joy of that process. Oh, it's like, and they're farmers. He's like, they're farmers too. They should know better. And just them doing it, he's like, how could they do this? He's like, you should be angry, Thorfinn. Our wheat's been ruined. He's like, why aren't you mad? And poor Thorfinn, like that look on his face, he's like, well, he's like, but I've been in their shoes. He's like, do I have any right to be mad? That's the thing. Thorfinn's like, I've been in their position. I've been in their shoes. I've been the one that has destroyed things. So he's able to be calm in this moment because he's like, I know what that's like. He's like, do I deserve to be mad? He's like, you should be mad at me even more if you're mad at them. And then that little face he makes where he's like, I deserve to die by your hands 100 times over too. Like, just, God, it's so sad. And that's what gets Einar to be like, he's just, Einar's like, I've tried to strangle you in your sleep before, damn it. It's so sad, like that face he makes. I'm sorry, I'm getting all the screenshots. And he just, God, his face being so shadowed, that anguish. And he's like, and I like that gets him to calm down for a moment. He's like, let's calm down, please, Einar. The fact that Thorfinn is the voice of reason is, because here's the thing. It reminds me a lot of the two coaches that I had doing speech when I was in college. I had one coach that was always kind of like Thorfinn, always kind of grumpy all the time. But then I had another coach that was like a big teddy bear. But when he got mad, it was like really mad. And then the one coach that was grumpy would have to calm him down and be like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. So it was just like that role reversal, right? That's exactly the dynamic I get with these two. And just, God, the way they animate Einar just being so mad. And Thorfinn knows exactly what that emotion is like, right? So they have Peter come and check it out. And Peter's like, okay. Peter's like, I will help you all I can. And they both look so defeated. He's like, but you need to wait until I do my investigation. He's like, let me figure out what's going on. Tell the master about it. Maybe he can cut you guys a deal. Do something. He's like, we'll get to the bottom of it. And Peter's like, I understand what you all went through. He's like, I wondered why my bullies would do something that wouldn't benefit them in any way. Which is essentially what these guys have done. And I like that we see Peter's eyes open. We actually see him, like, I wonder if he's just lost his sight over the years. But I like that we see him. He's like, people who love to discriminate can be found everywhere. Yeah, but not everyone is like that. And that's the thing. He's like, there are going to be trolls everywhere, but that's not everyone. And I like that Thorfinn in that moment kind of looks over like, okay, yeah, case in point, right? He's like, don't lose hope. Like, dig yourself back out of the pit. Don't lose hope about it, right? And I love that everything instantly gets gloomier and just more and more overcast, right? But Peter's like, this isn't the end, right? And then we find out kind of the nail in the coffin that this has not been Einar's day. Not only has Einar dealt with his entire wheat crop being destroyed by the retainers, but he asked Arnheid about her becoming free, and she's told him that the master's taken a liking to her. And that's just like his crush. It's like instantly being shot down. She doesn't have a deal like ours that allows her to earn her freedom by working. I wondered if she's pregnant because she's like holding over the robe over her. If she was just cold or if she was pregnant. I wondered that. If maybe she has his child. It seems she's given up on ever being free again. And that's so sad because Einar's like, even if they like you, you become bound to you. If they like you, they become bound to you. And if they hate you, this is how... He's like, you're not free either way. Either they like you and you have to stay against your will, or they hate you and they use you against your will. And it's like a lose-lose situation. And poor Einar, he's like, what kind of lives are we living? It's like in this moment, he's lost hope of becoming free, like unlike what he's had in the past, right? I feel like the wheat field was like his one thing he was holding on to. He knows he can't have Arnheid now, and he's such a teddy bear and a gentleman that he's going to let her go, even though he hates it. But he still had you think he still had the garden, he still had everything, and now that that's gone, it's just completely ruined him. Bless his heart. And then Thorfinn's like, I don't know what to say. It's his turn to not know what to say. And that's when the retainers show up, and Thorfinn's like, no! And they were just so awful, right? And this guy, what an asshole. And he's like, oh, it would have been too putrid for anyone to eat. And I love that it's Thorfinn gets in the way. Thorfinn gets in the middle of it and just knocks his freaking teeth out. I love it. He beats him to the punch, literally. And then they both just start getting the shit kicked out of him. That, when he got hit in the back of the head, that hurt. But yeah, Thorfinn, Him getting mad. Our boy. Oh my God. I guess I can't call him a boy anymore. But him getting mad on Einar's behalf. Mm-hmm. And then I like that both of them are both like, oh shit, what did we do? They're both like, crap. They broke his jaw. I just love that they both have the most innocent expressions like, oh, we just beat him up. Not good. And then, yeah, as Thorfinn gets knocked out, it's like he has a concussion from getting hit in the head with a freaking shovel. And as he's like trying to see Einar getting beat up, he sees flashes of the innocent woman. So it's like he's seeing flashes of his past, right? It's like he's going into survival mode and it's like PTSD where he's just getting flashes of his past brought back up. And then him falling down into the pit. Ugh. And then he starts to see his father, and his father's trying to tell him something. And he can't remember what he's trying to tell him. And then we get that stupid cliffhanger. Damn it. So, yeah, this episode was pretty amazing. I really loved this episode and everything that it did for Thorfinn and Einar's character. I am glad that the Arnheid stuff is out in the open. I'm glad that may still become a plot point later on. I'm fully anticipating it becoming a plot point later on, but I'm glad that for now, it's not. I'm glad that for now, Einar has acknowledged it. He understands it. He hates it, but he's not like all worked up like, I'm going to go kill Kettle and get my lady. No, that's not his deal. The plants, though, that wheat, though, like, that was a lot of damn work. So, yeah, there's so much they can do with Thorfinn's character in this season, and they've done so much with his character already, and I want him and Einar to stick together. I do. I almost wonder if it's like a Bjorn and Askeladd situation, where Bjorn was kind of there as Askeladd's right-hand man through thick and thin, right? I wonder if Einar is going to become Thorfinn's right-hand man through thick and thin. Maybe. But I'm all for Thorfinn getting this character development. I am all for him gaining this confidence and trying to figure out his purpose in life as he's struggling to like reconcile with his demons. You know we're going to go back to it next episode. I feel like they're setting up Thorfinn to have this Phoenix moment. And I'm ready for it. I feel like it's going to be the moment he turns a corner like Thor's did and gains that, like, I want Thorfinn to get to the Zen moment, but he's got to work for it, and that's what we're doing right now. So, yeah. So, yeah, I'm really excited. I hope you all are too. I hope you enjoyed this reaction discussion. I've talked for an hour about this, but it was a really good episode. So I hope you all enjoyed this commentary and discussion. I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 9 of Vinland Saga. Bye.